Welcome to Wild Mother's Way podcast. I'm Shannon Marie, and today we're stepping into the powerful, sacred world of wild birth. This episode is an invitation to reconnect with the innate wisdom that every woman carries. The wisdom of bringing life into the world in her own wild, intuitive way. Together, we will explore what wild birth means, how it encompasses unassisted wild pregnancy and birth, and why this ancient practice is so deeply empowering. To set the mood, I'll share a sneak peek from my upcoming book, Birthright. This is a portion from a chapter I call Wild Terms. The language of wild birth is unlike anything you'll find in mainstream narratives. It's about connection, reverence, and trust. So here's a little sneak peek into the book that I'm writing. In my sacred half-sleep state last night, my thoughts danced around the inadequacy of terms. Terms like conception or implantation attempt to capture the spark of life but fail to honor the magic of that moment. A mini Big Bang, stardust exploding into stardust, igniting life inside my sacred yoni space. Terms like pregnancy condense the wild cosmic transformation of stardust into a perfect living human into a mere 9 letters. And then there's birth, a word that somehow tries to encompass the epic journey of breaking through primordial waters, traveling through the dark tunnel of creation into light, and experiencing the world for the first time. These words, conception, implantation, pregnancy, birth, are too flat to hold the magic. Worse, they've been stolen, medicalized, and stripped of their sacredness. I want the magic back. I want every moment of baby making, baby growing, and baby bringing to shimmer with awe and wonder. And I know I'm not alone. Women crave this magic. Many don't even realize they need it, but they do. We deserve it. It is our birthright and the birthright of our babies. Enter the term wild. Wild, it feels good, it feels alive, it feels unbridled. To be wild is to be free. It feels good to let the wind tangle your hair, to abandon bras and underwear, to feel the earth beneath your feet and the sun on your skin. Wild love, wild sex, wild bursts of starlight in my yoni. Wild pregnancy, wild birth, wild motherhood. So that concludes the excerpt from the book. And let's dive into it. What is wild birth? Wild birth isn't simply rejecting modern medicine or glorifying one single way to give birth. To me, wild birth is about reclaiming the sacredness of birth as an intuitive, deeply personal experience. It's about trusting your body, listening to your baby, and honoring the ancient wisdom encoded in your DNA. For most of us on this journey, this looks like a medically unassisted pregnancy and birth, a journey where the mother herself becomes the ultimate guide, trusting her intuition and the natural processes of her body. A lot of women call this freebirth or unassisted birth. Wild birth isn't about recklessness. It's about informed, intentional choices that honor your sovereignty as a mother and your connection to life's most sacred act. So now that we've explored the language and essence of wild birth, I'll share a bit about my personal journey and how I discovered free birth, why it resonated so deeply with me, and how it really shaped the work that I'm doing today. Recently, I met a friend, and as often happens when mamas connect with each other, the topic of birth came up. She asked me about my current birth plans for my upcoming baby, and I often choose not to share birth plans openly to avoid potentially negative conversations. So I told her simply, I'll have my baby wherever I am. And she was confused, knowing that my family and I were in the midst of deciding where to move and live, and naturally, she wanted more details. I explained that I free birthed both of my daughters and that I'm completely comfortable giving birth alone wherever I am. She was in a state of shock mixed with excitement. "How did you even know that was possible with your first baby?" she asked. "Did your mom give birth to you like that?" And her question made me giggle a little bit because the truth is, no, my mother did not give birth to me like that. And I was born via C-section, most likely unnecessary. It had been recommended to her because her first baby, my older brother, was also delivered via C-section. He was a breech baby, and back then they told her she needed surgery to deliver him. After that, they convinced her that she couldn't give birth vaginally at all. The narrative was, and often still is, once a cesarean, always a cesarean. And this concept is so deeply flawed. This is a belief rooted in a lack of trust in women's bodies. But my mom, like so many women, wasn't given any other information. She simply accepted the medical advice because that's what most people do. This was over 30 years ago, and of course the information to challenge medical birth advice was out there somewhere, but it wasn't available to her in that moment. And it breaks my heart to think about how many women are still in the same position today. So the way I discovered free birth, when I got pregnant with my first baby, I knew I wanted to have a home birth. And I just assumed having a midwife attend was a pretty standard thing to do. But when I looked into midwifery care, I realized I could not afford it. And that left me wondering, could I just do this on my own? So I began studying midwifery and home birth books, and I came across a book called Unassisted Childbirth, and I devoured it. This book helped me remember. I knew in my heart that I didn't need anyone else to help me give birth. And this decision wasn't about rejecting help. It was about completely trusting myself and my baby. So as I shared my story with my new friend, she told me about her own births. And she said something along the lines of, I had very traumatic births at a birthing center, which most people in this home birth, natural birth world would consider safe. Anyways, she says, afterwards, I told my husband, I wish I could have just been a cat in a closet. And her words were shared in humor and made me laugh, even though they were reflective of the trauma she experienced. But they really stuck with me. And I think so many women feel this instinct, the desire to retreat, to trust their bodies, to birth in peace. But they don't know it's possible. They've never been informed that they have other options. So this is why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. This is why I'm writing the book that I'm writing. I believe that women need to know that they are powerful, capable, and sovereign beings. They need to know that they can choose how, where, and with whom they birth. And they need to know that the wisdom they're seeking has been within them all along. Wild birth is about remembering that we're capable and sovereign. It's about reclaiming the power that has always been within us. It reminds us that birth is not something to be managed, controlled, or medically monetized. It's something to be deeply honored. And in a world that often disconnects us from our bodies and our instincts, wild birth brings us back to ourselves and to the strength that we've always had. Our ancestors knew this. For thousands of years, women have birthed in connection with their environment, their community, and their intuition. Wild birth is not a new concept. It's an ancient practice that modern women are remembering, honoring, and experiencing. And my goal is to inform, inspire, and remind more women of this truth. My own journey with birth has taught me that this process is so much more than physical. It's spiritual, emotional, and transformational. And every mother, no matter her story, carries the capacity for this power within her. So I want to dive into sovereignty over labels and what I believe is the true essence of wild birth. So before we go any further, I want to take a moment to address something I've seen come up often in conversations around wild birth, and it's this attachment to labels. For some, the essence of wild birth or wild pregnancy gets wrapped up in these really strict definitions, and I want to invite everyone to just completely let go of that. In the freebirth community, there's such a beautiful spectrum of how women approach their birth. Some mamas choose to have ultrasounds while others don't. Some see a provider during pregnancy but decide to give birth at home alone. Others invite a midwife into their space but ask her to simply be present, sitting quietly in the corner unless called upon. Some hire a sovereign birth worker or birth keeper, a supportive presence who offers education and guidance, but doesn't interfere or intervene. And for some, wild birth means birthing alone with no one but herself and her baby. The beauty of wild birth isn't in the exact choices a mother makes. It's in the fact that she is the one making them. Wild birth isn't a contest of who is the most natural, unassisted mother out there. Wild birth and wild pregnancy are about sovereignty, about the mother reclaiming her authority over her body and her baby. She isn't forced, coerced, or convinced into anything. Every decision is hers, rooted in listening to her body and her baby. For me, personally, I'm not anti-medical. I simply choose not to participate in the medical realm unless I deem it absolutely necessary. And for me, pregnancy and childbirth do not warrant the involvement of medical professionals. And that's my choice. The heart of wild birth is that every mother makes the choices that feel right for her. And the sad truth is that many women who wish to make sovereign choices during pregnancy and birth may still feel pressured or convinced by midwives or doctors into unnecessary procedures, interventions, drugs, or surgeries. And these often start small, but can quickly cascade into a completely different experience than the one she envisioned. And this is yet another reason why I'm so passionate about the work that I'm doing. Women need to know that sovereign birth is not only an option, it's safe, empowering, and deeply fulfilling. And while it can look different for every mother, the essence remains the same. She chooses, and she feels supported, safe, and respected throughout. In an upcoming episode, I'll be hosting a special guest. Her name is Cheyenne. She's a lovely, lovely, lovely human soul. And she is a sovereign birth worker. And Cheyenne and I will dive deeper into these choices and explore the many ways women can reclaim their power during birth. Whether it's a completely unassisted birth or a birth supported by family, doulas, or birth workers, the point is this. A wild birth is about the mother's sovereignty, her choices, and her comfort. I hope that helps you understand what I'm speaking about and writing about when I use the term wild birth. And, for me, that means a completely unassisted free birth, but that might not be what it means for you. So what does wild birth mean to you? I'd love to know. And even if it's not the path you chose with your previous babies, I'd love to know, how might these principles of trust, connection, and reverence change the way that you view birth and motherhood? If this episode resonated with you, I would love for you to subscribe and share it with another mama, or leave me a review. I would also love if you would go follow and share my Instagram with other mamas who might be interested in these explorations of wild birth and wild mothering. My name there is at Wild Mother's Way. And I'll leave you with another little excerpt from the chapter called Wild Terms, coming up in Birthright, hopefully by the end of the year. A wild pregnancy, a wild birth. It's so beautiful. If you're feeling the call from deep within your bones, join me. Join me in this wildness. Join me in reclaiming our birthright. Join me in howling at the moon with our sisters as we bring forth the next generation of wild stargazers, earth dancers, and baby makers into existence.